Hey everyone, so today we're going to continue our look at the developmental psychology unit by talking about attachment theory. Now, this last section of three lessons covering attachment today, empathy and theory of mind, and gender and social roles is all about looking at the idea of how we develop an identity. And the variance of experiences, cultures, and genetics that we possess all influence our behaviors, our personality, and are all a part of forming our identity as well. And the effect our environment has on our identity formation will be discussed throughout this unit. And like I said, this will include looking at attachment, gender identity, and empathy and theory of mind. So in terms of attachment, attachments made in early childhood are thought to be pivotal to our identity development. And I'm going to underline this word pivotal because attachment is our emotional bond to a specific person that is reciprocated. This does not only have to be between a parent and child, but this is often the first attachment forms that we make, right? If we don't have solid attachment, if we don't have a solid emotional bond with our parents, then that might influence the course of our relationships throughout our lifetime. And there can be developmental stages for attachment as well. At birth, this could be indiscriminate attachment, where you are just attaching to whoever's around you. At 7 to 8 months, more specific attachments and bonds become commonplace. That's where like children start to cry when they're pulled away from their mother. And then at 9 months, the child will move from one key attachment figure to multiple attachments. Suddenly they know not only mom and dad, but grandma and grandpa, or aunt and uncle, or brother and sister. And there is a possible biological link between hormones and attachment. Oxytocin is one hormone that is released by the pituitary gland and is believed to be responsible for human behaviors associated with bonding with others and attachment. And it's also known as the love hormone. So, um, you know, the possibility of that may be true for loving relationships to form. We're going to look at Harlow's monkey study first, and this is quite a important study, quite a famous study, and this is based on the understanding that attachment is driven by contact comfort rather than simple satisfaction of basic needs. And so what the aim of this study was to investigate the role of contact comfort in attachment behaviors in rhesus monkeys, right? The monkey study. And so they took 8 infant rhesus monkeys in an independent measures design experiment. So each monkey was only in one condition. And they had an artificial surrogate mother built, monkey mother that was built. And we're going to see that on one of the next slides. And there was a light bulb that was making the mother warm, and also a milk dispensing mechanism that was installed on the mother. But there were two modifications. For one, the cloth mother was built from wood and cotton cloth. The cloth made it easier to cling to the mother, which enabled this contact comfort that was going on. The wire mother was also made of wire, funny enough. And so it was identical to the cloth mother in everything except for providing comfort. And so these monkeys were then placed in a cage with both the cloth and wire mother so they could choose which one of them to spend time with. So there were two conditions. In one, the cloth mother lactated, meaning it had milk, where the wire mother did not. In the other one, the wire mother lactated and the cloth mother did not. And so they wanted to see what the time was spent with each of the mothers. So in this study, the infant monkeys preferred to spend time with the cloth mother, even in the condition where the cloth mother did not provide any food, right? Did not provide any food. By the age of 20 days old, the infant monkeys learned to use the wire mother only to get milk and then spent the rest of the time with the cloth mother. And so what they found was that the results contradict the idea that attachment behavior is tied to the basic needs, right? And so since monkeys preferred the company of the cloth mother, even though she did not satisfy those needs for food, the attachment must be driven by something else. And so we see the cloth mother here and the wire mother over here. Now, this could be, I think, even in the Harlow study, and you guys are going to watch a video on this throughout the week, but even in the study, what Harlow found was that the monkeys would go over for like a few seconds to the wire mother and then for hours to the cloth mother. They would hang on to the cloth mother for hours. Now, another key figure in research on attachment was John Bowlby. And Bowlby's theory was that attachments are vital to the child for healthy development. And he also stated that the initial attachments formed were likely to affect all subsequent relationships. So if one has a poor relationship to their parents, especially in terms of the emotional bond we felt as little kids, that could impact the course of their spousal relationships, their work relationships, their friend relationships, any other relationships they have in their life. And on the cognitive level, the primary attachment formed early on became the schema for subsequent attachments and relationships. So if you felt like you were neglected, or if you were neglected by your parents early on, you may feel like you have to be self-sufficient in life, and it may be harder for you to form positive quality relationships unless those cognitive schemas are replaced with something that is more positive and enduring for survival and thriving. And part of his theory was this maternal deprivation hypothesis. And Bowlby argued that there would be effects on behavior that would continue across the lifespan if an individual did not have a sound initial attachment figure. And this would have an effect on their adult personality. Now, even though it's called the maternal deprivation hypothesis, a male could be the initial attachment figure. In 39% of cases where there's a strength of attachment, the mother was not the baby's main attachment figure. So this is really based on the main attachment figure, which in most cases is the mother, but in other cases is not. In most cases, if the individual receives plenty of love and care from the primary attachment figure, then they will develop strong positive attachments throughout their lifespan. But if not, the individual will struggle to form good relationships the rest of their life. And so deprivation, as we talked about with trauma from the primary caregiver, can lead the individual to believing the world to be a hostile place. And this leads to more antisocial behavior. And they talked about potential criminality, which we'll see in the Bowlby study in a second here, but more likely it's more antisocial behavior. So Bowlby 1944, this is a very famous study as well, and he wanted to test out his maternal deprivation hypothesis by looking at a delinquent population. And so Bowlby interviewed 44 juvenile delinquents who had been caught stealing and 44 controls who had not stolen anything. And he interviewed the children and mothers separately, interviewed the juveniles first to ascertain their personalities. He would diagnose affectionless psychopathy and a lack of affection for or empathy towards others. He also established whether they felt a lack of guilt or shame at their actions, and that also informed the diagnosis. And then families were in addition interviewed to determine whether the thieves had prolonged early separations from their primary caregiver in the first 2 years of life. So, of the 14 thieves that he diagnosed as affectionless psychopaths, 12 had prolonged separation from their primary caregivers for 6+ months before the age of 2. So, a quarter of their life before the age of 2, they were separated from their mothers. And so these tend to indicate that if a child has experienced early separation from primary caregiver for more than 6 months, then the chance that they will become delinquent is greater, leading to less attachment to other people who may set them on a better course. And it's more likely that they develop some form of affectionless psychopathy, where they don't experience emotions as much, they don't think about how others would feel, those sorts of things. And so this maternal deprivation can explain some of the offending behavior. There's also a internal working model um, that was key to part of Bowlby's arguments here. And this occurs at the cognitive level in that these early attachments would inform all future attachments. So most babies who are well attached follow a typical stage-by-stage approach to attachment formation. As they age, attachment will become more personalized between the two people, and the uniqueness will underpin their identity formation. He also argued that the primary attachment is unique. It's the first to develop, it's the strongest, it provides a model for relationships which the infant will expect from others. It also forms a schema for ourselves, which we've seen is very strong in terms of how we think about the world and process information. And it also emphasizes the importance of the first attachment formed. But Bowlby also argued that there was a critical period for this attachment. And much of this, though, was from animal studies, which we've talked about the limitations of before. But research suggested that there is a critical period. If attachments were not formed by this point, then they might not ever be fully formed. And so if you delay these primary attachments until after 12 months, then it would be possibly useless for most children. If it's delayed until after 2.5 to 3 years old, it would be useless for all children. And so like in his study where he's studying affectionless psychopaths, the idea that they missed 6 months from their first 2 years of life was highly detrimental to their experiences. And these would have clear potential effects on the identity of the individual. And it seems likely that if the critical period is missed, then the effects will be lifelong. In terms of evaluating Bowlby, I'm going to go back to this idea that we must really take care in comparing animal research to human behavior. Even if you're writing about an animal study in an SAQ or an ERQ, you have to make sure, make sure that you are stating why this research on animals would be compatible with human beings and how it might be changed by the fact that you are studying human beings. It's also a reliance that human babies have on their mothers. Since they're not immediately mobile, will mean that attachments fulfill a very different need to those of animals who are more mobile at birth. And so human babies end up becoming much more potentially reliant on their immediate caregivers than animals would. Also, Bowlby's idea of attachment occurring as an innate process and evolutionary advantage suggests that mere exposure to another individual is sufficient for an attachment to develop because we already have those keys for it. And this has been supported by animal studies. But studies have also found that attachment formation is more delicate than that. Attachments form with individuals that display sensitive responsiveness to their needs. And this just means that they are thinking about the needs of the child. And then research also underlines the importance of attachment for a child's development and identity formation. These can be so long-term that healthy development is important. So someone else who also talked about and studied the role of attachment was a former protege of Bowlby, and that was Mary Ainsworth. And she studied the Gonda tribe in Uganda and came up with 3 different types of attachment. The first was securely attached. This is where infants are keen to explore. They have high stranger anxiety. They are easy to calm and are enthusiastic at the return of their carer. And the caregivers become sensitive to the infant's needs as well. The second type, type B, was insecure avoidant. Infants were willing to explore. They had low stranger anxiety because they had not formed that tight attachment to their caregiver and were unconcerned by the separation. They also avoided contact at the return of their caregiver. And these caregivers are often indifferent to the infant's needs. And then insecure resistant attachment is where the infants are unwilling to explore. They have high stranger anxiety and are upset by separation, but seek and reject contact at the return of their caregiver. In this case, caregivers are ambivalent to the infant's needs, but also demonstrate simultaneously opposite feelings and behaviors, leaving the child unknowing of where the parent stands in terms of their care. But Ainsworth also identified 2 important features of attachment. Infants often seek proximity to their mothers, especially when feeling threatened. And we saw that in the Harlow experiment as well. The other point was that secure attachments allow infants to explore like things that aid cognitive and social development like play by using their attached figure as a safe base to explore from and return to. So you can think of this almost like the playground. If you look at a playground, oftentimes parents are sitting off to the side. That's where base is. And oftentimes a child, if they feel like they've been bullied on the playground, or they feel like, or they got hurt on the playground, like they fell, they will come back immediately to the parent as a safe base. And we're seeing that in real time there. And that's a symptom of attachment. If the child does not have this secure attachment, at least according to these theories, maybe they don't come back. Maybe they go hide somewhere when they're feeling scared or afraid. And so that leads us into Berry et al. And Berry et al. Was a genetic study that we looked at long ago, but they wanted to see the influence of genes on insecure attachment. And so what they did was they genotyped parents. Sorry for my marker there. They genotyped parents and children and evaluated children for attachment behaviors at 7 and 15 months based on Ainsworth's pattern of attachment. And this involves tracking the genetic makeup of the participants. Ainsworth's theory was later updated to have 4 different types of attachment. That's not as important right now for what we're talking about with this study, and that's why it says 4 different types. So the results were that the infants with the 2 short alleles of the 5-HTT gene had a greater risk for developing insecure attachment by 15 months if the mother was also unresponsive to their needs. So these are genetic and environmental causes for insecure attachment. Infants with the 2 short alleles with responsive and comforting mothers did not have a greater risk for developing insecure attachment. And those with 2 long alleles, or a long allele and a short allele, who had unresponsive mothers were also at not as great of risk of developing this insecure attachment as those children with too short alleles and an unresponsive mother. And so a child's development is the result of a complex interplay between many different factors. And these genes also interact with the environment to end up affecting behavior as well. All right, with that being said, if you have any questions on attachment, please come find me. This is a behavior that has long-ranging developmental issues with it if that attachment is not developed, especially in the first couple of years of life.